As of January 2018, 34 states and the District of Columbia permit some form of no-excuse-needed early voting. 3 additional states conduct elections exclusively by mail. What would you do to enable maximum participation of eligible voters in Connecticut elections?
So this is, I think, given our state, given our nation, a fairly easy thing to do and something that's incredibly important. Connecticut has one of the tightest, most restrictive voting set of regulations in the nation. I went to help someone figure out how to do absentee ballot today, and the restrictions on an absentee ballot, you have to be ill, you have to be out of the country, there's all sorts of restrictions that prevent you from getting an absentee ballot. If you don't think you can get to work because you think your kid's going to be sick, you should be able to get an absentee ballot. It's still a valid vote. You have to prove who you are. There's no form of fraud that can happen because you need to prove it. So an absentee ballot should be much easier to do. In addition, we can vote on the day of voting. So many people, so many states allow voting that you can be early. So I'm going on a business trip. Let me get my vote done. Let me get that taken care of. Let me check that off the list. And so it should be easy to vote. It shouldn't be hard to vote. Yes, you should show who you are to vote. That's not the issue. It's how do we make it easy so people can stand up and fulfill their right to vote. And that's so important for us and for America.
Thank you. Mr. O'Day.
I agree. So I want to talk about transportation a little more so I don't have to do my rebuttal time. So literally, the public-private partnership issue is a huge one. So we had to prioritize our spending. What happened is we spent $700 million on a busway between New Britain and Hartford. $350 million of it state money and $350 million of it federal money. And literally, if you look, there's nobody on those trains. We got to prioritize what we spend our money on. That is ridiculous. One of the ideas I had, and both Gail and Tony were on the phone with me, I know it sounds a little crazy, but I got the commissioner to stay on the phone for an hour and a half, and we talked to the Boring Company. Now, what's the Boring Company? I know Elon Musk, he's got a lot of time now because he's not at Tesla anymore, but literally, they've got a proposal in Chicago to build a high-speed transportation system from downtown Chicago to O'Hare. I want to do the same thing at no cost to the taxpayer between New Haven and Manhattan. They're also planning it between DC and BWI. I know it sounds crazy, but Google the Boring Company. Things are happening technology-wise. Make it a public-private partnership. No cost to the taxpayer, and you bore under the ground, and you'd pay $15 to go to Manhattan in 12 minutes from Stanford. How great would that be? Imagine going from New Haven to Stanford in 10 minutes. What I'm telling you now is we need public-private partnerships. We had legislation that the unions made hide on companies, so we couldn't use them a few years back. Make them known, promote them, and let's do public-private partnerships, no cost to the taxpayers.
Okay, that's time, I'm afraid.
And vote.
All right. Ms. Thomas, the question is on early voting.
Hilarious. So we are asking our citizens to do the most important thing for our democracy in a 14-hour time frame. We have more time to buy a Mega Millions ticket, and hopefully you buy it tonight. But part of the reason I'm on this ballot is because my Republican opponent, among many other Republicans, have voted against just about every voting rights legislation that is, and I actually think that's somewhat criminal. I mean, not indictable, but it's crazy to me. It's unfathomable. People who work 2 jobs, I do a lot of phone banking for other candidates, and people have always expressed concern. Like they're caring for an ailing parent, they have a job, 2 jobs, 3 jobs, whatever it is, or they commute like I did for many years to Manhattan, and they can't make it to vote. We have to make sure more people are brought to the table between absentee ballot provisions, early voting. Denise Merrill testified when this vote came up that she could do it in a cost-effective way. Maybe we limit it to just the Friday, Saturday, and Sunday prior to Election Day.
I'm afraid that's time.
Okay.
Ms. Lavielle.
Thank you. Do I have to go to jail?
No, it's not
Okay, you sure? Anyway, thank you. I know I have voted for at least 2 amendments calling for no excuse absentee ballots. So there are some nuances here. There was a constitutional amendment resolution a few years ago that actually, while it was purported to allow all kinds of different situations where you could do early voting, what it actually did was strip all the language out of the Constitution so that, which restricted things to just the way they are now, just stripped it all out, and then allowed the legislature subsequently to do whatever it wanted. So it kind of left a void in the Constitution, and that is what I remember we all voted against. I think that no excuse absentee ballots is a wonderful thing to have, and I would support that right this minute if we could do anything about it here today. So I think that's all I'll say about that one. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Haskell.
This isn't an issue that I feel strongly about because I'm a capital D Democrat, because I'm a member of the Democratic Party. I feel strongly about this issue because I'm a lowercase d Democrat. I believe in a democracy, that we're better off when more people participate. And early voting is exactly the sort of policy that would encourage and incentivize people and help people get to the polls. Look, as our moderator said, we're one of just a handful of states that doesn't allow people to vote except for that one Tuesday in November. God forbid you're a single working parent or a commuter and you don't have time to make it to the polls that day. My opponent will tell you that we can't have early voting because people might change their minds, but we already have absentee voting. And, by the way, people change their minds, I think, because too often politicians send low and late mailers, which we've already shaken hands with, neither of us will be doing. So why can't we have early voting in this state? The greatest crisis, I think, in our democracy is that 50% of people, roughly, in this community voted in the last midterm election. That's not nearly enough given the high stakes of who we sent to Hartford. And a central mission of my campaign over the last 6 months has been to work to get every single generation to the ballot, no matter what their political beliefs. I truly believe that we're better off when it is as easy as possible to vote and participate and play some role in shaping Connecticut's future.
All right, Ms. Boucher.
I believe that Representative Gail Lavielle highlighted why it's so important to look at the details of any bill, because oftentimes the details do not at all reflect what the title of the bill really is. I believe that the early voting question can be easily solved by no excuse absentee voting. And many of us, I in particular, am fully in support of having no excuse absentee. That really would solve the problem. The problem with having early voting is things happen at the very last minute that one can't even anticipate. It could be a week before an election. Case in point, I think if people knew before they were voting that it was a contract that was signed for state employees, the CBEC agreement that was signed and delivered by the majority party this year, that put the DOT and higher education in a terrible bind. Those commissioners that the president of higher ed told us directly to our face that the reason they're running out of money is their high fixed costs, their administrative costs. In fact, the DOT is 9 times higher than the national average of their administrative costs, and it's eating up the funds that they would use for our rails and our roads. So we have to be careful about what we agree to and the contracts that are engaged in by the state, because it can tie the hands of future governors, future legislators, and in fact, most other states do not do collective bargaining for those benefits. They do it by the normal budgetary process, which reflects what's happening in the economy.
Okay, that's time. Thank you. Is there any rebuttal or extension on this one? Yes, okay. Ms. Thomas.
I just have to get back to voting. 37 states and D.C. early voting. I don't think that was addressed by any of my people in the other party. It's just, we have, as Will said, we have to make sure people are getting to the ballots the way our society operates, we are disenfranchising more and more people to vote. The devil is in the details, I agree, but I did not see any details in the early voting proposal that would make anyone vote against it, other than just making sure people aren't able to express their American right to vote. That's it.
All right, any other rebuttal on this one? Okay.